Welcome everyone to our session today on employing people with disabilities. I am Laura Sinclair. I work as a disability rights advocate for the Disability Law Center of Virginia, and it is my pleasure to work today with our panelists to help them to share a little bit about what it is like to be an employer and what it's like in the workplace to help people with disabilities succeed. So I would like to take a moment just to briefly introduce our panelists, and then we'll kick it off with Candace. So to introduce Candace, Candice Brown works as a vocational specialist with Skookum Contract Services. She works at Fort Lee, Virginia, and Joint Base Langley, Eustis, Virginia, both of them Skookum sites. We have joining us also Matteo Lieb. He is an employment policy and program manager at the National Down Syndrome Society. And he works with companies, local organizations, individuals to expand employment opportunities for people with Down syndrome and other disabilities. We are also joined by Charlotte Woodward, a community outreach associate with National Down Syndrome Society. She supports public awareness and community outreach. And we are also joined by Megan Mason-Todd, the vocational director for Skookum Contract Services. Megan works and lives in Washington State, where the Skookum headquarters are located. So with that, I will go ahead and turn our panel over to Candice Brown so that she can get started telling us a little bit about what she does and what it's like to work with people with disabilities in the workplace. Candice, go ahead.
Thank you, Laura. Give me 1 second. I'm going to go ahead and share first. Okay, and do you all see the presentation? Because you all have went away from me.
Yep,
yes, we do.
See it.
Okay, thank you. So as Laura stated, my name is Candice Brown and I'm accompanied by Megan Mason-Todd. We are from the vocational department with Skookum Contract Services. And we are thrilled to be here today, and it's wonderful to make a connection with people who are invested in people's rights who have disabilities. And I'm going to first go ahead and share with you a video. This is a little window into Skookum.
You know, it's human nature. If you're different, people will look and you're different. Sometimes it's from birth and sometimes it's from an accident. I was hit by a drunk driver and I lost my left leg.
PTSD is, for some of us, a living nightmare.
8 years ago, my close friend shot me 4 times, including the face.
I felt like people were seeing me as a person in a wheelchair.
Interview after interview, people couldn't see past my appearance.
Getting back into the workforce, I had to be a civilian again.
I put myself out there and that's where I met Skookum.
Skookum is a contract service company. Our job postings actually say preference for people with disabilities.
I saw on the ad it said people with disabilities encouraged to apply. I'm like, who hires people with disabilities? Like nobody would hire me.
Skookum was looking for me.
Too often, I think people with disabilities aren't given that basic opportunity to give back to society.
Finding the right match of what the job and tasks are to meet someone's skills and abilities, that's the magic here.
Think about the engagement you get in a workforce when you can help people realize their dreams.
That smell of diesel, that world I left, and it was almost like coming home again.
What makes us unique isn't what we do, it's how we do it. We manage 15 million square feet of facilities.
We do things from laundry for a local hospital, janitorial and grounds maintenance on military installations. We compete for contracts. They're not handed to us.
We needed great stakeholders, great partners who really understand what we do and invest in us.
Once I started working, I got my self-esteem back and I got my personality back.
I wake up every day, I put on my leg, I go do my thing.
I'm elated that I have this amazing team around me that trusts me.
All of the people that we employ at Skookum, they're the ones doing the hard work and making that happen for themselves. We're just opening that door for them. The individual who feels empowered from being successful in a job, It ripples to the community, it ripples within their family life, it ripples within every aspect of our society.
I think I have the power to do anything that I really want to. I said to the nurses, if you make me better and you get me through this, I'll make something good with my life. And I did.
Our mission here at Skookum is creating opportunities for people with disabilities. Skookum is an Ability One employer. We employ 1,350 people in 12 different states. We're located in Washington State, Idaho, Montana, New Mexico, Texas, Kansas, Arkansas, Tennessee, Virginia, Washington, D.C., Maryland, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina. 1/3 of our employees are veterans. 950 of these employees have disabilities, and most of them are disabilities that are invisible or considered invisible. Skookum is located in 4 different sites in Virginia alone. And our line of work is total facilities maintenance, grounds maintenance, vehicle maintenance, logistics, and janitorial. And within Virginia, we're located where I'm at currently, Fort Lee, which is total facilities maintenance, Fast C and Blackstone, which is a Department of State Foreign Affairs Security Training Center. We're also in Newport News down at Joint Base Langley Eustis, Central Issuing Facility, CIF, which is logistics, at the Coast Guard Academy in Yorktown, Virginia, which is a total facilities maintenance. Our employees with disabilities have struggled to be competitively employed. They've struggled to get jobs. Many have left their jobs due to lack of accommodation, and some have experienced discrimination. I personally worked with an individual that had a massive stroke while he was employed at an unknown or unnamed business, and was told that due to his physical and mental ability that he no longer had prior to, that he had to either go on FMLA or be fired. So he ended up leaving that job and coming over to Skookum, where he is now thriving. Types of disabilities that we work with or have employees currently that have mental health, physical, learning, developmental, deaf and hearing differences, visual, TBIs, traumatic brain injuries, autoimmune, loss of limbs, ADHD, seizures, and migraine disorders. Some of our common accommodations that we do here at Skookum is adaptive technology such as tablets. And within the tablets, it's also like a Zoom or a talk to speech feature that is often used, time off for medical appointments, ergonomic workstations, which can include chairs, keyboards, standing desks, and other devices. It's all determining on the person and their disability. Assistance with reaching out to an employee assistance program, which is a benefit for all of our employees, whether you have a disability or not. A reacher stick for those that typically have like a physical disability or back injury where they can't reach as much, or it's better if they're not reaching. Cooling apparel, this is heavily used in roads and grounds during the summertime here in Virginia. And PPE, steel-toe boots that are customized in a lot of our departments. Shoes are, well, steel-toe boots are required, but whether they have to be laced or they have to be 8 inches tall versus a tennis shoe, I feel, that they're customized, whether they can just be slide-ons or whatever is accommodating to the employee. Most of our accommodations are inexpensive, such as assistance with prioritizing tasks for the day and week, ASL interpreters, having smartphones, the company providing them with smartphones so people can text instead of talk, flexible start times and shifts, time in a quiet, dark break room space or to walk outside or whichever is needed. So extra breaks. Written material is read aloud, not being required to drive vehicles or paired with someone who can drive. And at Skookum, we believe in helping people find good fit jobs that match their abilities and their strengths. And that is all I have.
Great, thank you so much, Candace.
Sharing. You're welcome.
Thank you. Now, would you like to add anything to that, Megan, while we have Candace on board talking about Skookum, since you're involved in Skookum as well? I've had the pleasure to work with you all and know that you offer a lot to your employees, and would love to give you a platform to share if you'd like. And I do believe, Megan, you are muted.
Sorry. I think we're an interesting organization. I mean, our whole mission is to hire people with disabilities. And I realize a lot of times it's hard for maybe other employers to figure out how to support people with disabilities. It does take a little bit of extra effort. We make it look easy because we're used to it and we do it so much. But I think the thing to remember is there's a lot of people out there with disabilities that are perfectly capable of doing the job that you have in your organization. And there are really inexpensive accommodations that can be put into place so somebody can be successful. At Skookum, we have a whole entire vocational department, which most companies don't have, but there still are simple things that can be put into place so people can be successful and not, feel discrimination or whatever. I mean, at some point, all of us in our lives are gonna have a disability, and we make accommodations for ourselves all the time. So I just, encourage you to reach out to different resources that are out there to get the ideas for accommodations that might be helpful, like Ask Jan, which is a federal organization through the Department of Labor that can help with figuring out accommodations that will work.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. We will definitely circle back around and have some questions for you when we are ready for our question and answer time. Thank you. Matteo, would you like to go ahead and share a bit about who you are and what you do with our session, please?
Of course. And I'm going to go ahead and just put up some slides for you guys as well. Sadly, I didn't have a video for us today, but hopefully these slides will be engaging. Much like you guys asked initially, can I just confirm with everyone that you guys can see them okay?
Yes.
Perfect. So thank you everyone, first off, for giving me and my colleague Charlotte the opportunity to be with you today. We're very excited. And I'll start off with just a little bit about myself. My name is Matteo. As you shared, I am the Employment Policy and Program Manager at the National Down Syndrome Society. Prior to that, I worked for a mental health supported employment provider here in Washington, D.C., where I both managed the supported employment program, the Transition Age Youth Program, and started off as an employment specialist, also known as a job coach. And so my experience in the disability employment space started off working directly with folks with severe mental illness, helping them attain and maintain competitive integrated employment opportunities. Now at the National Down Syndrome Society, I manage our DS Works program. So our DS Works program really fundamentally has a mission of helping folks with disabilities, and obviously specifically Down syndrome, attain and maintain and increase access to the workforce. And there's several ways in which we do that, and I'm going to go over a couple of those now. So the first thing we do is we promote our DS Works success stories. So I would encourage anyone out there to go to ndss.org and go to our program areas, and when you click on employment, you'll see our success stories there. We have over 60 examples of folks with Down syndrome working in all different fields and careers, including food service, financial services, sports, entertainment, art, fashion, all different kinds of industries. And to me, these success stories really have two primary benefits and why it's such an important part of what we do. One, it shows folks with Down syndrome, whether it's children, young adults or even older adults who are still, trying to find what they really enjoy from a career perspective, it shows them that anything is possible for folks with Down syndrome. Too often, folks in this community face expectations that just don't meet what their capabilities and potential are. And we really want to elevate the fact that folks with Down syndrome have a place in any organization, in any industry, when there's a good fit and the skills and experiences match. The other thing that's really valuable about our success stories is when we go talk to employers about what hiring folks with disabilities and Down syndrome specifically is like, we can say, well, look at all these different examples. Look at all these people and all the amazing experiences they have. And it's not a dream 10 years down the line for you to hire someone in your organization. These folks have already done it. These businesses have already done it. The other thing we do at the DS Works program is we develop resources for the community. These resources range from resources for employers directly. So once again, if you're checking out our website, we have a resource there called Guide Me and Watch Me Succeed, which is a resource guide that was developed by myself and one of my colleagues who manages individuals with Down syndrome employed by the National Down Syndrome Society. And this is a guide to help employers with training advice for folks with Down syndrome specifically. And in addition to that, we do a lot of other really great resources to help job seekers, employers, and other folks in the community. We also support our local partner organizations. So the National Down Syndrome Society has over 300 local affiliate partners across the country. And we work with them to either develop programming at the local level or connect them with some of our corporate partners to help create pipelines at the local level for folks to get directly into jobs. And that ties in perfectly to the next one, which is we do work with companies across the country, large and small. We work with both Fortune 200 companies as well as small businesses that have one or even no locations at times. And really there, our goal is to help those companies, provide technical assistance, give them the tools and the resources they need. I love the reference to CAN earlier. That is an amazing one that, of course, I'm always using in my back pocket to help connect people to. Accommodations, as you said, are such a huge part of supporting folks with disabilities. And what we tell people all the time is that these are very inexpensive. And you guys made the point really well before. Over 50% costs nothing. And the remaining share costs an average of $500. And when you think about that investment over a period of years, it's a really good investment. And the last thing we do with the DS Works program is we advocate for positive employment legislation for folks with Down syndrome. So specifically, there are a couple areas that we look at. One is sub-minimum wage reform. We are actively pursuing legislation at the federal, state, and local level that would phase out sub-minimum wage practices. In particular, at the federal level, the Transformation to Competitive Employment Act. Among other pieces of legislation, we very much are proponents of ABLE and expanding access to ABLE for folks with disabilities and other similar policies. The other part of the work we do at the National Down Syndrome Society is our CEO Commission for Disability Employment. This was a collaborative of 3 founding organizations, us, Voya Financial, and the Society for Human Resource Management. We came together to realize that there are a lot of barriers and concerns for folks with disabilities and that the private sector needs to step up. Of course, there are public sector organizations and entities that are going to be a huge part of the work that needs to be done, but the business community also plays a huge role. And so our mission is to raise awareness of the untapped potential of people with disabilities and work to ensure that people with disabilities achieve and maintain equal access to meaningful employment. And so when you look at specifically what we do with our members, we have 3 primary goals. One is to create meaningful impact on policy through effective legislation and advocacy. We complete thorough research into the disability employment landscape, really try and understand what are the barriers? Why are businesses struggling to find folks with disabilities? And on the flip side, why are folks with disabilities struggling to get some of the jobs that they should really be quite, worthy of attaining? And lastly, we effectively engage and educate the business community through media outreach and producing deliverables and content in other ways. So really trying to help the business community, trying to have them on as partners. They are part of the solution, and we want to make sure that we stand with them side by side. So now looking at the business case, you know, we want folks to hire folks with disabilities, and in our case, folks with Down syndrome specifically. And why is this so important? First off, it's important to understand that folks with disabilities have historically had lower labor force participation. So when you look at comparing folks with and without disabilities of working age, the difference in participation in the labor force has been about a third. So folks with disabilities are participating at about a third the rate of folks without. And obviously that is a very disappointing amount of disparity, and one that we really think, you know, should be closed. But when you look at sort of the lost value, inclusive hiring and bringing more people with disabilities into the business community offers benefits to the business community itself. And just to touch on a few, these are some of the ones that I think are most important. So first is a competitive advantage. You as a company get better and have a competitive advantage when you bring people with disabilities into your organization. And I think the way that really that's best exemplified is through innovation. When you have, studies have shown that when you bring more people with disabilities into an organization, they have a better understanding of a broader collective of customers and clients. And so they make you as a company more competitive and more adept at finding new customers and broadening your scope as a business. Productivity and efficiency is a huge part as well. You know, you want the best. Employees bring value to an organization, and so employers want to bring the best into their companies. A study by the Society for Human Resource Management found that over 90% of hiring managers and HR professionals thought that folks with disabilities perform tasks better or at the same standard as those without. That's over 90%. So we're really talking about folks that are just as good, if not better, at doing the job as their peers without disability. And the last couple ones are profitability. So Accenture, in partnership with some other organizations, including Disability In, conducted a study that looked at businesses who champion disability inclusion and what were some of the outcomes they saw. And what they found was that those organizations had 28% higher revenues and 30% higher profit margin. So once again, there's a business case for hiring folks with disabilities. We also see higher retention. Folks with disabilities improve retention within an organization. And there's also gives access to new markets. So one particular study found that when you increase hiring, if you were to increase hiring in the United States of folks with disabilities by just 1%, we would add $25 billion in GDP growth, which is absolutely huge. And for such a 1% increase, we really want to make those kind of changes for the economy. So I'm going to close out before I turn it over to Charlotte with what are some best practices for engaging employers? And this can be taken from either a self-advocate's perspective, a nonprofit who works with employers, or other members of the community. So really the first one, and this is, I think, is one of the most important, is highlighting that business case for inclusion, not just the ethical case. The ethical case is very important, right? We fundamentally believe that everyone should have a right to be included in life, in all aspects of life. And therefore, being included in the workplace is ethically imperative. It is a no-brainer. But I think that where a lot of businesses maybe don't see it quite as clearly is the business case. And that's going through some of the numbers that I just shared earlier, and giving those examples for why folks with disabilities are the best candidates for jobs. And when you have that kind of business case, it makes it just that much more of an effective argument. Folks want the best people in jobs. And when you can show that an individual or a group of individuals would be the best fit, them having a disability doesn't matter. It's the fact that they're the best candidate. And that's the kind of approach that really works with talent acquisition in the business community. The other thing you need to do is also listen and understand their needs, right? Businesses have specific needs. And when we listen as advocates and say, okay, well, you're looking for someone who can do this or someone who can do that, you're more of an asset to that company because you have a better understanding of what their ideal candidate looks like. And that ties into my third point, which is provide value to them, right? If you can promise an employer that you're going to bring a great fit for that particular job and that this particular candidate is really going to make the difference, that's a huge added value to employers and one that they want to have within an organization. Educate businesses around supports and accommodations. Supports and accommodations, much like was discussed by my fellow panelists, are huge. And when you educate them and provide them with those resources, that's going to help their employees, which in turn helps them. And of course, we want to have employees that thrive, and when they thrive, they perform better, and when they perform better, businesses do better, and it's helps everyone. And lastly, collaborate with other stakeholders. As I said earlier, there's so many people helping advance this cause of disability inclusion in the workplace. Reach out to others. A lot of people have done things before. Once again, Jan, great example. If you're looking for expert resources on accommodations, go to the other stakeholders that are experts in those fields. Work with the folks that have really led within a particular sphere, because they're going to bring a lot of value. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Charlotte, who will share some of her perspective and why it's so important for self-advocates to be included in the workplace. Charlotte, are you ready to go? I think you're muted, Charlotte.
Yes, I am. Hi, everyone. My name is Charlotte Woodward. I am the Community Outreach Associate at the National Down Syndrome Society. I am so excited to be here this afternoon to tell you more about DSS. And of course, a little bit about me. When I was born, doctors told my mom that I might never be able to learn to read or write because I have Down syndrome. And the doctor said that my future would be run instead working in a sheltered workshop. All too often, this is what doctors tell new parents of babies with Down syndrome. I was born not only with Down syndrome, but I was also born with a congenital heart defect. Half of people with Down syndrome are born with a heart condition. I had 3 open heart surgeries when I was a baby to help my heart, and I had another one when I was 10 years old. As I continued to grow, my heart just could not keep up with the rest of my body, and I started to exhibit telltale signs that my heart needed more help. Fortunately, my doctors looked beyond my diagnosis and thought I would be a good candidate for a heart transplant. That was in 2011. All too often, doctors don't do that for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. In fact, they intentionally deny us this fundamental right because they assume that we cannot handle such a big surgical procedure. If I had been denied a heart transplant, I would not be here today. On January 30th, in 2012, I had a heart transplant, and I am very, very grateful for my family, my heart donor, and my doctors for making it all possible. Having that life-saving surgery enabled me to go on to break down barriers. I graduated from Northern Virginia Community College, summa cum laude, and transferred to George Mason University, where I am currently a senior studying sociology with a focus on social change and inequality. Last year, I was inducted into the GMU International Sociology Honor Society. Employment is a cornerstone to living the American dream. To me, having meaningful employment means having dignity that comes from being a dedicated worker and receiving a living wage. Without meaningful employment, people with disabilities cannot be economically self-sufficient. They cannot pay rent or afford to buy a house, get health care, get married and start a family. Without employment, people who are differently abled will be forced to choose between unemployment and poverty versus living independently. I am living proof that people with Down syndrome and individuals with other disabilities can work. I am proud to say that I earn a competitive wage at my job and that I get to be part of an organization whose mission is to be the leading human rights organization for all people with Down syndrome. I love working at the National Down Syndrome Society because it is so important to end ableism. I am the Community Outreach Associate at NDSS, and some of the many things I do are being editor-in-chief of a magazine by and for people with Down syndrome, and the program director of NDSS's DSS Works program, and am working on compiling a database of colleges for NDSS's Inclusive Education program. These are just some of the many things I do as a National Down Syndrome Society to work towards inclusion and equity for all people with Down syndrome. I hope to inspire you to help NDSS open the doors to employment opportunities for people with Down syndrome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charlotte and Matteo, Candace and Megan. We appreciate so much that you've shared a little bit about what it is that you do and all the important work you offer that contributes to more inclusion and opportunity for everyone in the workplace. I do want to address some questions for our panelists, so please go ahead and type any questions that you have into our chat box now. I do have a question to start with, which is directed at Matteo. If you could answer this question. This question is, why do you think that organizations do not hire more people with intellectual or developmental disability with such amazing statistics on the value we bring to the workforce? What changes are needed?
No, that's a really good question. There are a lot of barriers out there. And I think for the intellectual and developmental disability community specifically, one of the biggest things out there is the stigma and lower expectations that really hurt a lot of folks. Looking further into the data, as you guys have seen, I'm a very data-driven person. There were a couple studies that were done fairly recently that looked at why folks with disabilities, specifically intellectual and developmental disabilities, were not being hired by employers. And what that study found, it was one of the top reasons, was a lack of skills and experience as being a huge factor for that. So, you know, I think that's one of the reasons why folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities don't, you know, if we had, as Charlotte was alluding to, opportunities for inclusive education, not just in the K through 12 system, but further. You know, I've had the chance to talk to a lot of community colleges about what they're doing specifically to engage folks with disabilities in their workforce development programs, because a lot of the time, you know, getting a 4-year degree or a 2-year degree is not necessarily the way to go, but getting a really good vocational based certification, whether that's, you know, something around computing or something, you know, HVAC or any of those things, can lead to really great skills for the workplace. I think another thing we see is transportation. Transportation is a huge issue for sure in terms of accessibility, whether it's folks who live in a rural community where public transportation is not an option, or even folks who live in an urban community where complexity or you know, lack of support for utilizing a public transit system can be a barrier. So we at the National Down Syndrome Society are working with partners like Lyft, the ride-sharing company, to really look into how ride sharing and other innovative solutions can address those transportation concerns for folks across the country. But I do think, yeah, a lot of the time there are, to answer the question, some companies who just don't know the value that it brings. Folks may look at a person with a disability and say, if I'm going to hire this person, I'm doing them a favor, right? They need the job. That kind of attitude is what really, really hurts folks with disabilities. Sure, they may get that job, but the employer's not looking at them as an asset. And I think those expectations really come back to sort of that divide between having a fully inclusive workforce for folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities versus one where folks are just kind of part of it for one reason or another and not really included as part of the team.
Thank you. We have another question that I think you may have just answered. That question was, why are there still such low expectations of people with intellectual or developmental disability, Down syndrome, etc., even today? How long have we been working to counter the stigma? And I think, Matteo, I just heard you say that there needs to be more hiring of people with disability to show just how much can be brought to the table. If you would like to expand on that at all, go ahead and take a moment.
Sure, although I do want to see if, Charlotte, do you want to sort of elaborate in your experience as a self-advocate what you've done to show folks how you've overcome expectations and really shown how much value you bring?
Well, I remember through my organ transplantation, I wrote down many barriers in that, like they aren't really given the chance to undergo such a life-changing experience, and I just happened to be one of the patients that happened to be a good candidate for a heart transplant. Same thing with my job.
No, I think that's a really good point, Charlotte, which is, you know, when folks are given that opportunity, I think it makes a huge difference. A lot of the time, Laura, what we hear from employers is that they simply don't know. They want to be more inclusive. They want to hire more folks with Down syndrome or other disabilities, but they don't know how. And I think the folks over at Skookum said it so great, which is they make it look real easy. And for a lot of, you guys really do. But for a lot of other companies, a lot of those things aren't innately central to the way they operate. And I do think, you know, when one looks at the effect that the pandemic has had, obviously there's been a lot of negative economic consequence for folks across the board. People with and without disability, people are hurting. But one potential silver lining, and the jury's not out yet, but there's been a shift, in my opinion, in the way that employers now view their employees. I don't know, looking around the room, a lot of us are at home. This would not have been the reality a year ago. And I think the fact that now an employer can make certain accommodations and supports for anyone in their workforce, to me, hopefully will indicate a much more open willingness to make similar accommodations and supports for their employees with disabilities. Things like a modified work schedule, things like being able to work from home. These are things that we all now in this pandemic are all taking advantage of, but hopefully when we're on the flip side of this and we're going back to our offices and back to normal life, folks with disabilities will continue to be able to take advantage of some of those accommodations that really help them access and maintain their jobs.
Thank you so much. I know that we are close to the end of our session, so I just want to ask one more question, starting with you, Charlotte, and then the same question to Skookum to get some different perspectives. What do you think we can do to make it easier for people with disabilities to talk to their employers about their needs? One of the biggest barriers to receiving support can be uncertainty about how to talk about workplace needs to be successful. So I would love to start with you, Charlotte, if you have some perspective, and then to ask Candace and Megan if they can share some of their perspective as well.
Yes, thank you for that question, Laura. To me, I would say that that probably the best way to go about this is to continue to have conversations about people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, including those with Down syndrome, with their potential bosses, and keeping them in the loop. People with intellectual and developmental disabilities and those with Down syndrome have been fighting for the right to be included in the workplace for a long time, and the phrase "nothing about us without us" is very important. We need to have representation in the workforce, and it is more important even now.
Thank you. Candace, Megan, would you like to chime in with some perspective on how employees might be able to talk about their needs in the workplace, how they can be successful?
I can start. I think it's important that an employee understands ADA law. There is law out there to protect those of us that have disabilities. Of course, you don't want to go blasting into the HR office and say, I'm using ADA law or whatever, but I do think it helps people to have an understanding of what their rights are under the law. Because it can help sort of smooth the process when you get into that HR department if you know what your rights are. I agree with Charlotte, a lot of it is just having a conversation with your supervisor, your manager, sitting down and saying, here's what I could really use to help myself be successful. I guess that's my perspective. Candace, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I would say mine's is the same, and I would agree with Charlotte. And as a vocational specialist, I have spoken to many individuals about how they feel, so I can understand the hesitation to come out, because I've heard stories that, they are afraid to come forward to their employers with their disability, whether they're civilian or a veteran. But in my role, I'm a vocational specialist, so I welcome the conversation. I open my doors to the conversation and to hear, as Matteo was saying, just to listen to what the individual needs to be successful, and maybe come with ideas, come to the table with some solutions, because like we said, there are a lot of them out there that aren't costly. So say, hey, what would it look like if we could put this in place for me? Or this is what I need, this is what I'm going through. So a lot of times just having that conversation, that open dialogue, and hopefully it's laying on some good ears that they're open and willing to listen. I know we're Skookum, so we are a company that does it. So again, it's like easy. So I'm like, yeah, just come on in. But I do understand it's not always easy, but I would say just come with some solutions on the individual side of like, hey, this is what I think that would help me. And it will probably help the employer, like, okay, I didn't think about that. So help them do the brain work.
Well,
Laura, do we have time for me to add just one quick thing on that?
Sure, go ahead. Before we wrap up, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think the other thing I was just going to say is on this, I think what Megan said about, understanding the law is really important, and to take that a little bit further, understanding the experiences of others as well. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, when you look at a situation from your perspective, that might be the first time you're facing it, and it might be quite daunting. Especially, if you're a young person who's trying to enter the labor force for the first time, or you're a person with a disability who, maybe hasn't been in the workforce for a while, and you're trying to re-enter it. That can be quite challenging. And so I think understanding the law, but understanding what others have been to and been through. So engaging with other self-advocates can be really huge. Peer support and mentoring is a really great asset. You know, we at NDSS really promote self-advocacy as a central component of all the work we do. And you know, I'm not going to pretend to understand those experiences when clearly they're not relevant to me. But when you can go and as Candace said, listen, both as a person with and without a disability, and hear the perspective of others who have been through those situations, that can really help with having those conversations and addressing those.
Great. Thank you so much to all of our panelists today. We appreciate your time. We know that this is a very short forum in which to address so many issues that we'd like to discuss so much more. So thank you again for joining us and taking some of your valuable time to talk to us. We do encourage all of our viewers to contact the Disability Law Center of Virginia if you have any questions or follow-up thoughts after our session today. You can reach us at our toll-free number at 800-552-3962, and we welcome your feedback. This session will also be recorded for you to view and to share if you would like. And again, thank you all for attending our expo today and for attending this session. Thank you so much to panelists and viewers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.